Hi, my name is Carol Beth Anderson, and this is video 6 in my series on how to use Adobe Audition to produce audiobooks. This one is all about editing. So we've gone over recording and setup and all of that. We've talked about mastering, and now we're going to talk about editing your files, getting them to where they sound really great, not just using the automated systems, but doing things manually to clean things up before the files are ready to be submitted to ACX or other audiobook distribution production places. As before, I want to remind you of a couple of things. First of all, I'm on a Mac. Some of this may look different for you if you're not. And also, I'm not an audio engineer. I'm just a narrator who likes to DIY, and this is what I've learned along the way. I'm not going to say it's all perfect, but I hope it helps you, and I hope it makes your path a little bit smoother than mine has been. Let's jump into editing. All right, the first thing we're going to discuss is how to create a file with just room tone in it, because we're going to be using that to fill in some gaps and to do some of our cleanup. So what you want to do is at the end of a file that you have, and we're just going to pretend this is a very short chapter file. It's not, but at the end of a chapter file, I want you to get probably at least 5 seconds of extremely clean room tone. For me, that means that I might hold my breath during that time. In fact, it's even better if you keep it recording, leave the studio, close the door to the studio, it will pick up those noises, that's fine. Let it go for several seconds and then come back in and use that room tone from when you were completely out of the studio so it doesn't pick up any noises that you might accidentally be making. So I've got this. This is something that I recorded earlier in our process that I did specifically to teach you how to edit. And at the end, I've got some room tone here. And then you're going to go through the process that we've already discussed on how to master a file. So when you master that chapter that you put the room tone at the end of, you're going to master it and use match loudness and all of that just like you do with the rest of the file. So it's going to be mastered to the same specifications as the rest of the file. You don't want to have a file of room tone on its own that you run through your mastering stack and your match loudness, because match loudness won't work well with it because it doesn't have enough noise in it. It doesn't have enough volume in it for match loudness I don't think it will work well. So I like to do it at the end of a chapter so that it's being processed along with your dialogue or your voice, along with your voice. So then you're going to take, I like to do a little over 3 seconds of very, very clean room tone. I'm going to take this right here, little over 3 seconds. I'm going to highlight that, and then I'm going to copy it. I do Command C. If you prefer, you can go up to Edit, Copy, however you want to do that. And then you're going to start a new file. Remember, we can do that with Command Shift N, a new waveform file. And I'm just going to call this Room Tone for Pasting. Okay, and then I'm going to save that, Command S. I'm just going to save it right there. Normally, you're going to save it somewhere that it will be backed up so that you can always have this file. And you might want to save it somewhere where it's really easy to get to because you're going to use this. You can use this same room tone file from one book to the next if your setup stays the same. So, and from one chapter to the next. So we're going to click OK. We've got our little file, and this is going to really help us. This room tone file is really going to help us on some things that we're doing later. So, I forgot to actually paste it in. I just realized I'm going to do Command V to paste that room tone in. There we go. Now we have a room tone file. Let me save it again. And there we go. All right. Let's talk about what we're going to do with this room tone file. When you're about to start editing, you're going to do something to set up multiple clipboards. So here's what's cool about Adobe Audition. You know, when you click Command C to copy, it goes on what's called a clipboard. And then when you paste, you're pasting from that clipboard. And so the cool thing about Audition is that in Audition, you have multiple clipboards. And so you can have multiple things copied and you can switch from one clipboard to the next to paste them. And so this is really useful with this room tone file. So here's how you're going to set that up. We're going to go back into that room tone file. We're going to select the whole thing. You can just double click to select the whole thing, or you can do Command A. You can go up to Edit, select all, however you want to do it. We're going to select all, all right? And then I'm going to make sure I'm in clipboard 1. To do that, I'm just going to click Command 1, or it will probably be Control 1 if you're on a PC. Command 1 is clipboard 1. If you would like to check that shortcut and make sure it's the right one, you can go into Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, and we can search for clipboard. And right here, we can see what these different clipboards are. It's got 5 clipboards. I actually use Command 5 for a different shortcut that we'll talk about in a little while, but because I never need 5 clipboards. But normally it would be Command 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to activate the clipboard that you want. So we've checked, made sure that that's our shortcut if you need to check that, and we're going to just click Cancel. All right, so we have activated clipboard 1, and now I'm going to do Command C and copy that little over 3 seconds of room tone to clipboard 1. Next, I want to put something on clipboard 2. What I want here is just a really, really short piece of room tone. I like to do literally 0.3 seconds. So I'm going to start here. I can start here at the beginning and go to 0.3. It doesn't have to be exact. And I'm going to click Command 2 for clipboard 2, Command C to copy. Now I've got clipboard 1 and clipboard 2. Each have something on there, and I'm going to try to remember not to use those clipboards for anything else. But if I do, if I'm copying and pasting something else and I forget to change to clipboard 3 to copy and paste something else, I can, if I'm in clipboard 1 and I accidentally do that, I can go ahead and just go back to clipboard 1, Command 1, go back to my room tone file, and click Command C. So I keep this room tone file open all the time. If you remember from before, I use a multi-track to keep all of my files together. So the room tone is always one of my files that is open. When I open my multi-track file, it automatically opens it. If you don't remember what I'm talking about, go back to one of the previous videos. I just don't remember which one I talked about that in. All right, so now we've got our stuff on our clipboards. And now we're going to set something up called Mix Paste. Mix Paste allows you to paste what you copied into any length, particular bit of the file. Let me show you what I mean by this. So at the beginning of a file, at the beginning of a chapter, you want really clean room tone. You don't want any sort of breathing or anything at the very beginning of a chapter. So I'm going to select this whole beginning part before I start talking. And what I want is I want to fill, that's like 1.2 seconds. I want to fill 1.2 seconds with room tone. I don't want to fill the entire 3 seconds from my clipboard 1. You know, I've put that 3 seconds of room tone. I don't want to just click paste and suddenly have 3 seconds of room tone at the beginning that I'm going to have to cut a bunch of it out of. And so I'm going to select this, and I want to fill just that amount with room tone. So here's what we do. We go to Edit, Mix Paste, or I always, of course, have a shortcut for this because I love my shortcuts. So let's go to Keyboard Shortcuts. We're going to search for Mix Paste. I can't remember if this is a shortcut that is already set up in Audition or if I set it up myself. I don't remember, but here it is, Mix Paste. My shortcut that I like is Shift, Command, V. And to set that up, you're going to click the Shift button, click the Command button, grab the V right here, and I would drag it down to here. And then I've got Shift Command V there. It's already there for me. And I'm going to click OK. So we've talked before about keyboard shortcuts. I'm not going to go into detail on that. I think that was in one of the first videos if you need help with that. But if you prefer a different shortcut from mix paste, you're going to use mix paste a ton during your editing. Feel free to do whatever shortcut makes sense to you. I'm going to click OK. All right, so I'm going to do my keyboard shortcut, Shift Command V for mix paste, and here's the settings that I want. I just realized, I don't know why my copied audio is at 57%. It should be at 100%. That was pretty strange. I'm glad I noticed that. I've been copying it at a lower volume. That kind of stinks. All right, so make sure these are both at 100%. Click Overwrite. And then you can even, if you'd like to, click Loop Paste 3 times in case you have like a really long area that you need to mix paste. But you really shouldn't. You shouldn't have a long area. The reason we did a little over 3 seconds is you're probably going to never have more than that amount of silence in your chapters. But in case you do, if you want to click Loop Paste, you can, so that if you do have a longer period of silence that you need, it will loop that 3 seconds for you. All right, and then you can double check the clipboard if you want to, but this should already be the clipboard that you set up, which was Audition Clipboard 1. So we're going to click OK. And look, it filled just that amount. It overrode it with our room tone, which is pretty awesome. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to show you one more time how quick this is when I do it. I click Command-Shift-V, return, or enter, because I already have it set up, and I'm not rechecking all of my settings all the time. Although, like I just said, I'm realizing I had one of my settings wrong, so I'm glad I checked it right now. Thankfully, we're dealing with audio that is so quiet that even me having it at a little bit lower volume just doesn't make a significant difference in my files. All right, so let's talk about how we're going to use that at the beginning and the end of a file. I like personally to have 0.6 seconds at the beginning of a file. I don't want to get into all the reasons for that, but there is a reason I do 0.6, not 0.5. So I have filled up this entire beginning of my file with room tone, and I'm just going to drag after the 0.6 all the way to where I'm talking. Select that and click Delete. I could have done that before I filled it with room tone. It really doesn't matter which order you do that in. So we've got 0.6 seconds of room tone at the beginning of our file. At the end of a file, I usually don't do this until the end, but I'm going to show it to you now. I do already have the room tone on it this time, but let's pretend that the end of our file only had this little bit here. I select this little bit that's left, and at the end of a file, I like to have just over 3 seconds. That's why I actually have that just over 3 seconds of room tone, because it makes it easy. Instead of using mix paste, I'm just going to use paste. There's my just over 3 seconds of room tone at the end of my file, and we are good to go. We're going to use mix paste at other times too, but let me show you why we have that second clipboard. Let's say that right here between these two things that I said, let's say I was punching and rolling and I did not, there needs to be a break there. There needs to be a little gap there, but there's not. When I am editing, I can switch to clipboard 2 by clicking Command 2, and then I just paste, and I've got 0.3 seconds in there. I have found that 0.3 seconds is often a really good pause time between phrases. So that's why I use it. Sometimes it needs to be longer, and so I'll just click in the middle of it and click Command V again, and then I've got 0.6 seconds. It's beautiful. So that's how I use my second clipboard. You may come up with other lengths of time you want, no problem. I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back to Command 1, clipboard 1. I try to use that as kind of my default. I forget sometimes, but I try to go back to that. All right, so that's how we use our different clipboards and our mix paste. Let me show you one more thing really quickly with different clipboards. Let's say that I needed to copy and paste this. Maybe I'm copying and pasting something from a separate file, like pickups or whatever. I would switch to clipboard 3. So I'd go Command 3, and then I'd go wherever I needed to paste it and just go Command V, and then oops. I forgot to actually copy it. So I switched to the clipboard, but I forgot to actually copy it. Command C to copy it, and then I go to wherever I need to paste it and click Command V, and then I've pasted it. And I just always make sure that I'm using that third clipboard to copy and paste things that are not room tone. All right, that's my first editing tip with using room tone files. Let's talk about one other thing to keep in mind before we get into how to do the rest of our editing. Over here on the right, we've got two little symbols. The first one is a magnet, and that's for toggle snapping. That just means if you have toggle snapping on, when you click somewhere, it's gonna like kind of automatically go to like close to the edge of a sound, but sometimes it doesn't go exactly where I want it to go. See, I'm trying to get something kind of closer there, and I'm having trouble doing it. You can always drag the playhead where you need it to be, but that's called scrubbing, by the way. You're hearing that slowly as I go over it. But I don't really like to have snapping on for editing because it doesn't allow me to be as accurate as I want to. Sometimes I'm trying to like select something and it stops at a place I didn't really want it to stop. So I usually turn that off. And if you find that you're having trouble getting your cursor to exactly where you want it to be, then just check whether or not snapping is toggled on or off. It should be off. This next one here is for playback auto scroll. We do want that on. And sometimes it will turn itself off, primarily when you're playing. If while I am playing a file, it took me forever to figure out why it does this. But while I'm playing a file, if I zoom in and out during playback, it will often turn off auto scroll if I zoom in or out during playback. And so if you're playing your audio and it's not automatically scrolling across the screen, there we go. If it's not automatically scrolling, then you need to turn auto scroll on so that it will start automatically scrolling for you. All right. That is snapping and auto scroll. Okay, let's talk next about what we're going to do to deal with unwanted noises. That's a lot of what we're doing when we are editing, is we're dealing with unwanted noises. So when I made this file, I was specifically trying to make unwanted noises with my mouth so that we could talk about how to deal with them. Unfortunately, I'm a lot better at making unwanted noises when I'm not trying to, so even these pops are not very poppy, but I'm still going to show you how to deal with them. So first, let's talk about how to deal with pops, and that's going to be, let's see if I can do it really well here. I think that was actually a pretty good pop. I wish I had done that on this audio file we're dealing with. It's also called a plosive, and so let's talk about dealing with plosives. So I've got here pop, pop, pop. Okay, none of those are very plosive-y, but let's pretend they are. And what I'm going to show you here is how I deal with most unwanted noises in Audition that are left over after I've already done my my mastering. Now, some pops are taken care of by my mastering because I've got that high pass filter on, the EQ, but some of them are still left behind. So let's just say we don't like how this P sounds. It's a little bit too much. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And I almost always use this little square up here. If you look up here at the top, marquee selection tool. Apparently it has an E shortcut. I never remember the shortcuts for these tools. So the little square tool usually works well for me. So I want to make sure that's on. I'm going to go down here to the spectrogram view. Pops always show up at the bottom of the spectrum. So I'm actually going to make this look bigger, like brighter. I just increased the volume. Don't worry about what I did there. Let's hear if maybe this will sound more like a pop now. Oh yeah, that's a good pop. I should have thought to do that before. So I just made that poppier than it actually was. So let's pretend this is what your pop actually sounds like. Oh, goodness, that sounds terrible. You can see where it sounds terrible because you see where the spectrogram is really brightly, it's bright yellow here. Bright yellow means it's loud. And so in the spectrogram, often we are looking for bright yellow when we have a sound we don't like because it's something that's louder than it should be. These lower frequencies are too loud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little tool. I'm going to select that loud part. Sometimes you'll even see these little lines coming all the way out here. We could select all the way to there if we see them when we're poppy. And I'm going to de-amplify that part. Now notice with pops, I'm not getting the very beginning of the P. I'm starting just after the beginning because that's usually where the issue is. It's not usually that initial P sound. All right, so I have some shortcuts set up, I'm sure that won't surprise you, that I use for de-amplification because I do de-amplification all the time when I am editing. This is what saves me from having to actually do a pickup, like a retake, re-record these poppy things. So let me show you what I use. We're going to set up a favorite, two favorites for some different amplification settings that I like to use. So first of all, we're going to record a favorite. We're going to go over here where it says favorites, click record. Now we're going to go into effects, amplitude and compression, amplify. -5 is what we want this to be at, -5. And then we're going to click apply. And then I'm going to click stop. And then I would name that amplify -5. I already have that favorite, so I'm not going to save it right now, but you would give it a name like amplify -5 and say OK. Now we are going to do another favorite. I'm going to click record. Go back to amplify, or you can go to edit, repeat last command if you want to. And we're going to go -15. I find this to be another useful amount of de-amplification. -15, apply. By the way, I also find it useful to have one that is +3 decibels. I use that sometimes if something needs to be a little louder. And another one that's -0.7 decibels if I just need to barely bring something down. So if you want to set up favorites for those two, you can, but I'm not going to demonstrate that right now. All right, I'm going to stop this favorite. I would call it amplify -15, and I would click OK. I'm going to go ahead and undo what I just did there. Don't worry, the favorite is still there. I just want to undo it and show you how we're going to use those favorites to actually fix this area. I'm going to highlight it again. All right, let's go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, and I'm going to find those favorites that I just saved. Amplify -5. It's right down here, and I use literally 5 as my shortcut for that because I do it all the time. So you would take the 5 and you would drag it down there, and then you would click OK. I think you can do multiples of these at once before you click OK. So then I would click amplify -15. So you don't have to click OK yet until we're done with this. And then I would click Command and drag my 5 down here for amplify -15. Again, Command 5 or Control 5 it will give you a warning that it's already set up for something. It's set up to use as your fifth clipboard. But I don't use 5 clipboards. I've never needed that many, so I just like to use the 5 for that. I like to use Command 5 for that because I can easily remember that 5 is -5 and Command 5 is -15, but you are welcome to choose a different shortcut. And then we would click OK to save those keyboard shortcuts. Now that I'm down here, I can click 5 and watch what it does. It just went down a little bit in volume. It changed color. I'm going to click it again. -10 might be enough for that one. Let's try it. might want it even a little bit quieter, so I'm going to select it again and click it one more time. Okay, that's better. The whole thing's a little loud, but I purposefully made it loud. And so that's not so poppy, and we've kind of fixed our poppy P. Now let me show you, if you overly de-amplify this, I'm going to use Command 5 like 3 times, so go down by 45 decibels. There's like no sound left there. And it sounds, honestly, maybe even better. So you can play with it and just make sure it doesn't sound weird. I usually try not to get rid of every single bit of sound down there, but this is one sound. The P sound is usually just fine if you do really cut out all of the low end. You just don't necessarily need to. What happens if we do it like this, where I just undid all but 15 of that amplification? That sounds pretty good. So that's what we're going to do when we have poppy Ps, is you're going to find those frequencies at the bottom that have too much volume in them, and you're going to de-amplify them. Pretty easy, right? Now let's talk about hissy S's. Once again, I tried to make these S's hissy, and they were not very hissy. I actually went in earlier and I amplified certain frequencies to make them hissier. So let's listen to what we've got here. Steam, steam. Okay. I'm not sure why there's a break between these two. I accidentally pasted something in at some points, pasted in some room tone. But I did manage to make especially these two S's pretty hissy. They were not originally. By the way, I'm going to adjust this so we can see more of the spectral view. Now, if you're using a de-esser like we talked about, you may not have many hissy S's. I don't have to make this change very often manually because the de-esser has handled it for me. But this one, oh, that is pretty hissy because I made it that way. So I'm looking again for that bright color. With S's, you kind of have to use a soft hand. It's going to end up, let me show you what happens if we overdo it. I'm going to do Command 5 for -15. It sounds almost a little bit lispy. That's too much. I'm going to undo that. I'm just going to do -5 in just the hissy part. Let's listen to that. That sounds a lot better. If there's a little bit left that's still really yellow and it still sounds a little too hissy for me, I might do a little bit of a smaller area and go -5 again. That sounds pretty good. So that's what we can do to take care of hissy S's. We can do that on this one too. Let's just go down by 5. Steam, steam. That's pretty good. And this one wasn't too bad, but I'll go ahead and do it and see how it sounds. I just went -5. That might be too much. That one probably doesn't need to be changed at all. Maybe a little. Maybe if I even just did kind of a smaller area. Pretty good. And then I could go in and fine tune if I need to, but don't stress too much. If you just have a hissy S here or there, it's really not a big deal. You don't even necessarily have to fix them all. But sometimes you're going to hear one that just sounds really pretty awful. I wanted to show you, there's another weird sound here that I'm glad my mic picked up. Steam, steam. Do you hear that right after this second S? Steam. It's like it almost sounds like I passed gas. I swear I didn't. Steam. But sometimes our voices just make some really weird sounds, especially if you got allergies or whatever. And I can see that sound. It's right here. In fact, when I highlight it, I'm going to listen to just that sound. This is in the settings somewhere where you can set it where when you're selecting, you can only listen to that sound. I'm going to try to find that setting for you where it's only doing playback on the part that you have selected. Let's see if we can find that. I can't remember where I changed that setting, but it's really helpful. Here it is. It's under spectral displays in preferences or settings. And you're going to make sure this is checked where it says play only selected frequencies when a spectral frequency selection exists. I like having that set up personally. So, all right, so I have selected that. We're going to listen to it. Kind of a weird sound. I just know it sounded really strange when it was played with everything else. Steam. Okay, so I'm going to select that again. Now, what I don't want to do is get too far over here into this yellow area. I want to really just try to select just that part. You can go in if you want to. That's zoomed way in. And then I'm just going to go 5, 5, maybe one more. 5. Let's see how it goes.
Steam.
Oh, I'm still hearing it. So it wasn't just that. Sometimes these kind of farty sounds, you can see them as horizontal lines. That's actually probably what I'm hearing here. So I'm going to select this part and go ahead and select that bottom part again too. Let's do Command 5, -15 on all of this. We can always undo if it's too much. In fact, I'm going to do one more -5. Let's just see what it does.
Steam.
I can still hear a little bit of it, but not much. So that means it's happening here too. Let's just take this whole part, go -15. Let's see what this sounds like.
Steam.
Oh, I got most of it. I might still mess with it just because I can be a little too perfectionistic, but honestly, it sounds fine.
Steam.
Sounds pretty good. So if you want to mess with it a little bit more, I could highlight this.
Steam.
That actually sounds pretty good. So now when you do too much, let's say you're like, oh, I think maybe I'm hearing something up here. Let me get rid of that.
Steam.
Oh, that sounds horrible. All we're going to do is undo, which is Command Z. So you just undo everything you just did. You can just try messing with different frequencies because you can always undo it afterwards.
Steam.
Sounds pretty good. I'm showing you how to fix this and how to fix it where you can hardly even hear it anymore, but just know you're going to need to develop an ear for what actually needs to be fixed. It doesn't all have to be fixed. All right, let's talk next. You can hear what I recorded here next.
And I've got some mouth noises. This is going to be the worst.
Okay, purposefully did mouth noises there. Let's talk about these mouth noises in between phrases. In between phrases, if there's no reason to have, this is actually a breath right here. You can see this fuzziness, it's a breath. But if there's no reason that we need a breath there, I'm going to use mix paste. So I'm going to make sure I'm going to use Command 1 to make sure I'm in my clipboard 1. Command Shift V, return. Now it's all clear. Beautiful.
And I've got some mouth noises. This is
okay, here's some mouth noises in between. Right here. Now, let's say that this is in the middle of a breath. It's not really, but if it is, sometimes you can just highlight just that click. The clicks are usually straight up and down lines. They're vertical lines. Sometimes you can highlight just that click and delete it, and you're good. Sometimes you will just highlight, these clicks are only right here. They're not like down below. There might be a little bit down below. I can just highlight that part. Command 5. Might do it one more time, but I don't think we need to. And maybe this one we can afford to delete. Let's hear how that sounds.
This is going to be...
There's still a little bit there. Sometimes I will highlight the whole area and just go 5, maybe twice, see what happens.
This is going to be the...
There we go. That sounds pretty good. Again, when appropriate, you can always use mix paste to completely do that too. Let's see if we've got any good mouth noises in the middle of a word.
And I've got some...
Okay, got one right here. This one I would not normally be changing. Do you see this little vertical line? Would not normally be dealing with it.
And I've got some...
You can hardly hear it at all. But let's say you could. Let's say you're like, oh, there's this big click in the middle of a word. I would highlight the part that I can see. And again, Command 5, Command 5. Instead of deleting, you don't want to delete when you've got too much other noise around it because you can end up deleting something you didn't mean to delete and then it'll not sound good. You also don't want to... sometimes you don't want to like paste room tone in because it can be too harsh of a difference. Going down by just using your de-amplify is usually a gentler way to reduce these sounds, and sometimes you don't even need to get rid of them altogether. But we're going for gentler when we are in the middle of words, especially. We're going for gentler.
And I've got some mouth noises.
Okay.
Audio.
Okay, there was a bunch there too, so I'd probably just... Sometimes when you highlight, you can see stuff better. Let's say we wanted to keep this breath. This little mountain is a breath. but I don't like the mouth noises after it. I might just go ahead and highlight those, Command 5, and maybe just delete the ones before the breath.
Worst audio.
Yeah, it's still like pretty yucky, and I don't want to mess up my room tone, like my natural room tone, by de-amplifying too much. So that one,
Audio.
if I can't get the breath to sound good, I will usually just go ahead and get rid of it, unless there really needed to be a breath there. In that case, maybe I'll find a breath from elsewhere and paste it in. But I'm going to go ahead and just Command-Shift-V, return, so that that's nice and clean.
Audio ever. Alrighty.
Okay, there's one more icky noise and more here. I can even see them. I don't even have to hear them, but
And let me.
there you go. I like swallowed and everything. So let's just Command-Shift-V, return.
And let me do some.
Now, I think I actually cut off that alrighty maybe a little bit too early. Let me undo and just go over a little bit and try that again. You don't want it to sound choppy. You want to, so like I got into my dialogue a little bit, and I don't want that. So I got into my narration. So not dialogue, but narration. Command-Shift-V. Let's try this again.
Alrighty.
Okay,
And
that sounded better. That the end of that that word didn't sound choppy to me anymore. Okay.
And let me do some big breaths.
All right, there are some really good videos out there about breaths when using audiobooks, when doing audiobooks. There's a really good one by Travis Baldry. There's another one I've heard really good stuff about that I haven't watched yet, but it's by Don Barnes. So I'm not going to talk a lot about breathing in audiobooks. This is something I honestly am still learning how to do well. Here's the thing with audiobooks. You don't want to take out all your breaths, or else it can sound really robotic. We want to sound like humans. And, human voices in audio is huge right now. So we do want some breaths. But sometimes we don't need a breath at all, or sometimes it just needs to be quieter. So let's say I'm like,
Big breaths.
oh my goodness, why did I breathe like that? That one maybe doesn't need to be there at all. So I'm going to select that, Command-Shift-V, and just get rid of it. But let's say I want this breath. It's just way too loud. I can select the breath, and I'm usually going to use, for a breath that loud, I'm probably going to have to go down by 15. So Command-5. Much better. Even if like I want a deep breath for effect, like maybe you've got somebody who's about to say something really loud and you need that deep breath, this one is going to sound so much better in a listener's ears than that one.
And then let's do some little breaths.
That little breath right there can probably just stay in.
And we'll talk a little bit.
Okay, that one was great. It was right before an and. If I've got a breath where there's a natural pause in speech, or like a natural pause where there's a comma, I'll usually keep that breath in if it's not too loud. I keep in a lot of breaths when people are talking because I just want that speech to sound normal.
Let me look.
Like even that one, not too loud.
Let me look.
But like, let's say this one
Breaths.
here, between, when you've got a pretty big break between phrases, that one might not, it's not egregious, but it might not need to be there. So I might go ahead and get rid of that one. So I'm just making choices one breath at a time, which ones need to be de-amplified, which ones can stay, and which ones need to go completely. But a lot of them I don't deal with. I've tried to learn to breathe better, and I'm continually trying to do that so that I don't have to do a lot of editing of my breaths. This shouldn't be something that's taking you hours and hours to deal with breaths.
Let me look at my list of what we're going to talk about in editing later. Oh, let's do a clothing sound.
Oh, that
All right.
sounded terrible. Okay, you probably already know by now. If you have a clothing sound like that in between your phrases, super easy to get rid of. Let's just paste in room tone. But let's pretend, I wish I had made that clothing sound while I was talking. Sometimes there will be clothing sounds that are over your dialogue, and you'll see this fuzzy stuff kind of up here where it should be, where there shouldn't be a lot of sound. And if it's just kind of a little bit of a clothing sound, sometimes I can go in here and select where I see it and de-amplify. It's not here, but I'm just showing you how I would do that. Do some de-amplification and see if I can kind of get rid of where we're hearing those clothing sounds. I might even do it in a little area like this. And then I listen to it and see if it sounds okay.
Got some clothing sound happening there. Okay.
Oh, I think I actually did keep doing it on there. Let's see, was that there?
All right, got some clothing
did.
sound
Okay.
happening there.
So yes, that's how I would handle that. But like the clothing sound started here, so I'm going to see what happens if there might be too much clothing sound. I might have to re-record this, but I'm just going to see what happens if I try to get rid of it this way. All right. Might even come down here.
All right, got some clothing sound happening there.
Okay, in this one, there's probably too much clothing sound, to be honest with you. I was really messing with my clothes. But sometimes it's just like a little bit when you reach up to turn the page on your tablet and you just have that light brush.
All right, got some clothing sound happening there.
And sometimes we can go ahead and get rid of it by doing some gentle de-amplification of these darker areas where the clothing sound is really kind of obvious in frequencies where there shouldn't be much sound. But you just have to try it and see if it works. If you're not sure, if you're thinking, I kind of think this sounds funky, go ahead and just do a pickup there. And we will talk more about pickups. I think we've talked some about pickups in a previous video. We have about doing pickups in raw audio, but now we've got mastered audio, and we will talk about doing pickups in mastered audio in video 7. So I want to talk about one more thing. We've talked about really most of the important stuff when it comes to how we're going to handle editing. And some of it you may just have to figure out on your own. By the way, a lot of people love this brush up here that's called the spot healing brush. I personally have not found that to be very useful. It doesn't always know what to heal. It's supposed to automatically, like, you can like go over things that sound weird and it's supposed to automatically heal it for you. Doesn't really work very well for me, but you can play with that if you want to. The other selection tool I do sometimes use is this Lasso selection. Sometimes I'll have a sound that I can tell it's this strange sound that actually is nothing close to a square. Let's say this sound was one I needed to get rid of. It's not. Let's say it was. I can lasso it, and then I can just de-amplify that little strangely colored area. Let's see. I wanted to talk to you about what's called artifacts. Let's say we need to change something at the very
Great stuff.
end of this. This is an S and a T right here. Let's say we need to change something here, but I accidentally get some of this U sound. This is a U. I accidentally like get over here and I've selected more than I should have. So let me go way down. I can see this little line here. I don't know if you're seeing it, but it's this little line. It's this little horizontal line, and that's called an artifact. It wasn't there before. It's there because I messed too much with the audio, and I want you to hear what this sounds like.
Great stuff. Great stuff.
There's this strange sound right here, and I don't want it to be there. Sometimes artifacts will sound like squeaks. They often do. Let me see if I can get this one to squeak. Ooh, yeah, I think we're going to get a good squeak here. You see how this little line was not here before?
Great stuff.
Oh, yeah, it's a horrible squeak.
Great stuff.
I'm going to let you hear just that. Oh, that's terrible. So that's why you've got to be careful. If I'm doing something with this sound right here, I don't want to go over into this loud part. It's easier to mess with quieter sound that's like really, really uniform. These S's and T's and F's look really uniform. Not always T's. This one just happens to, this is kind of a fuzzy T. But these S's are really uniform. Certain sounds are easier to mess with than others. So you just have to be really careful messing with louder sounds. Sometimes you're not going to be able to fix them by de-amplifying certain frequencies, and you're going to try and try, Don't try too long. It's just a waste of time. This is one thing I'm still trying to learn. I'll sit there for 5 minutes trying to fix one sound in my audio when I could have used less time going into my studio, recording a pickup and splicing it in. So if it's not working, just redo that part, do a pickup. All right, the other thing I wanted to make sure that you know is as you are editing and as you're editing, after you've mastered, as you're editing, you may come across something that you do need to go back and fix later. And usually you don't want to leave right in the middle of editing a chapter. You might end up with 3 pickups that you found as you were editing the chapter. It might be weird sounds that are in your audio that you didn't realize were there before. It might be that in listening to it, you realized you used the wrong character name. Whatever it is, you're going to want to drop a marker so that you know where to go back and splice in that pickup later. So here's how you do that. Let's say I need to redo this part.
I'm going to stop this recording.
Okay, right there I said I'm going to stop this recording. I'm going to click M for marker. Pretty easy. I'm up on match loudness right here, but we're going to go to where it says markers. If that's not on your screen, you can always go to Window, Markers, make sure it's showing and move it where you want it to be. And I can actually click this marker a couple of times and rename it. I said I'm going to stop this recording. Let's say it was supposed to be I need to stop this recording. I would just make a note of that. I need to stop. And that's probably enough for me. I will look back at that and go, oh, I was supposed to say I need to stop this recording. And then I'll know what to re-record. You can sort your markers. Sometimes I do them by name when I'm doing my character file. I think we talked about that earlier, just so that I can have them alphabetical. But when I'm doing pickups, I usually want them sorted by start time. That just means they're going to be sorted by time. They're going to be sequential. So that's how you drop a marker. That's all that I've got for editing. Now, here's the thing. That sounded like a lot when we were editing less than a minute of video. I mean, less than a minute of audio. But it doesn't have to take you forever. At first, it might, because you're going to be getting used to all of this. There's a lot of muscle memory involved with making the changes and getting used to the keyboard shortcuts. All of that, that's fine. It used to take me a lot longer to do editing than it does now. The improvement is twofold. One is that I have figured out I don't need to change as much as I used to. Actually, it's threefold. So yeah, I'm not as perfectionistic as I used to be, and that's important. You're not going to have perfect audio, and you really don't want to over-edit it because you can end up with artifacts and things where it actually doesn't sound as good. Remember, you're still a real person. You're not AI. It's okay for it to sound like a real person talking. The other thing is that I learned better mastering techniques, so it's taking care of more things automatically. If you don't yet have Isotope RX Standard and you're planning on doing audiobooks, it's just so amazing for mouth noises. That has saved me lots of time. And the other thing is just that I've done it a lot, so I have gotten used to all of the muscle memory stuff. And so I'm just faster at it. Oh, and one more thing, I talk cleaner than I used to. By doing my own editing, I started to hear all of my mistakes, which I think was kind of a blessing. And so when I'm recording, I talk cleaner than I used to, and I'm more likely to punch and roll if I hear myself doing something really bad, instead of trying to get rid of it later with editing. So it used to take me several minutes for every minute of audio, and now it usually takes me about 2 minutes of editing for every minute of audio, which for me is a big improvement. Other people are sometimes far faster than that. That is editing. Feel free to drop questions if you have them. I may or may not have answers, but I'm happy to let you know if I have the answer or not. And our next video will be on proofing and pickups in mastered audio. So that stuff that you find after the audio is already mastered. How do we do pickups for that? And also we'll talk about a little bit more about proofing, but we did talk about that some in video 3 as well. And then video 8, I believe, will be our last video, and it'll be about final checks before exporting to MP3 and uploading to ACX. So Next two videos should be pretty quick, but thanks for sticking around for this one. I hope you learned some important new tips.